As an adult, I love my father. A lack of discipline is probably what I describe is the core issue. And my mother, God bless her, she worked full time also. And she just, largely worked like entry level, low paying jobs. So as hard as she worked, it wasn't enough to really close the gaps for us financially as kids. And what's wild about it, and especially where we sit today, I watched the massive financial instability I had as a kid, and I promised myself I'd never be an entrepreneur or business.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Corwin Smith to talk about work less, make more, enjoy life. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day, to have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward. How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want, to be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Life and business go together, and you have to figure out how. Too often, people don't plan this out well or systematize their business to serve their life. And that really should be the goal. I reverse engineered my business of helping business owners to make and keep more money to fit my life. You've got to figure it out for you. There's some great systems out there. Bend them to you, don't bend to them. Today, we're going to chat with Corwin Smith about that. I personally love scaling up from Verne Harnish and figuring out how to do this for successful business owners. And on top of that, Corwin loves profit first. We're going to chat about that as well. Corwin Smith is a valuation growth coach. He is certified in scaling up the Rockefeller habits by Verne Harnish. He's got expertise in diverse methodologies, including spiral dynamics, 5 behaviors of a cohesive team, and metronomics. He works with companies to help them grow and to be able to reduce the amount of time they spend by 40% while doubling their net profit and increasing their business valuations by 500 to 800%. He also is a family guy, and he wants to spend time with his family and enjoys giving back and is a member of EO. Let's meet Corwin and learn from him. Welcome to Richer Soul, Corwin Smith. It's great to have you join us today.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Rocky.
And I'm excited to learn from you. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Yeah, it's a great question. Money's such a fascinating topic for me because at its core, it's meaningless. But I found my experiences growing up put so much meaning on what money is and what money isn't. So a little bit about my background. As my dad describes it, he's an entrepreneur, which he describes as he's largely failed at every business venture he's tried. So my childhood looked like probably from the ages of, my early memory until about age 9, my father was very financially successful in agriculture sales. He had a private plane, 14 Corvettes. He was a big car collector. I mean, he was living the high life. And that company sold and he lost his job. And the next business he bought, because he's passionate about cars, that's interesting to him, he bought a body shop that Come to find out, he didn't do his due diligence, was basically in bankruptcy and had all kinds of financial issues. And, probably he didn't have much business being a body shop business owner. And so my childhood was interesting. It was really famine or feast. And there was rare times that it was anything but famine or feast. And so, yeah, it created a really fascinating story for me that, I'm still unwinding today. I think we're always kind of unwinding and reorienting our story that, money's hard to come by. It's famine or feast, like that kind of thing.
I was going to ask you, how did that affect you in that regards? Because you get to see both parts. And, I'm going to guess, but if I were a kid, feast is a lot better than famine. How do you because emotionally, depending on how you dealt with it, one day you're wearing all the wonderful stuff, going
nice stuff,
living large. And then the next day it's like, I can't afford lunch. And your friends are looking at what happened to you?
Yeah, it was wildly uncomfortable. I was reflecting with my wife. It was about 3 years ago. And I said, honey, it just finally dawned on me. I think I was around age 10 or 11. And we only had Christmas because of the generosity of a stranger. They brought us a gift card for Burlington Coat Factory. And I'm sharing this with my wife. And my wife literally thought I was making it up. She's like, there's no way. I'm like, no, honey, that was real. My dad, for whatever reason, I as an adult, I love my father. A lack of discipline is probably what I'd describe is the core issue. And my mother, God bless her, she worked full time also. And she just, largely worked entry level, low paying jobs. So as hard as she worked, it wasn't enough to really close the gaps for us financially as kids. And what's wild about it, and especially where we sit today, I watched the massive financial instability I had as a kid. And I promised myself I'd never be an entrepreneur or business owner.
You wanted to take the safe path, huh?
Yeah, I wanted to take the safe path. So I was on the safe path. I was at Arizona State University. I was working for a medical imaging company in business development or sales, calling on doctors, making good money, largely dissatisfied because, I was making good money and it was a rather prestigious job for my age, but it was just all empty. It was entirely empty. I didn't see any impact of the work I was doing. I'd go entertain doctors' offices and then, they'd send us business and it was really empty. And so I was ironically in the accounting program at Arizona State University. And there's two accounting courses that are the, weeding out counting of courses. There's financial accounting and managerial accounting. I took managerial accounting and did fine. It made sense. It was reasonable. It was rational. I took financial accounting and everything was bass-ackwards in financial accounting. And it was at the same time that I was making a transition in my life. I was burned out with the medical sales stuff. And I started working for a disaster restoration company, fire and flood restoration company. And it really lit me up because I could see a tangible impact and difference made in people's lives. We'd show up late at night. Their house had flooded. They'd had a fire. We'd literally clean it up and kind of put the pieces back together. And so it kind of pulled on my heartstrings as a bit of a savior mentality, if you will, for lack of a better term. So I started in that business, and within 6 months, a guy that worked there at the company, him and I ended up partnering up, and we started our own disaster restoration business together. I mean, we just started doing the math. The math made sense. What it looked like is we could work less hours and make more money. And you know how that goes.
How did it go?
Well, so I'll share. I dropped out of the accounting program, got a degree in business management, which was largely useless. I mean, it was a waste of money and a waste of time. But I promised myself I'd get a college degree because that looked like the right thing to do. My parents never completed college, and that was the safe route, right? So I completed my bachelor's of science and management, had a piece of paper that was worthless. And at the same time, we went from startup to $2 million in revenue in about 2.5 years. The company grew fast. About that time, I joined Entrepreneurs Organization, or EO, which was wildly helpful for me in my journey. Kind of joined that by accident again. A lot of my life seemed to be in my 20s accidents. Joined Entrepreneurs Organization, and it's really Entrepreneurs Organization that I credit for much of the business success I had today, because I got introduced to people that thought differently, that had different skill sets than I had, and the own little microcosm of people I knew. Most of my friends at the time were in medical school or in some kind of professional training. I was the only one that was an entrepreneur, so I was kind of on an island. My father-in-law is an entrepreneur. He owns a concrete business, and he never grew his concrete business beyond the people he could see laying concrete. Because he said, Corwin, If we lay down concrete wrong, it costs me 3 times as much to rip it out and replace it. So I'm not going to grow my business. That was the mentorship I had. So it was thanks to Entrepreneurs Organization that I got introduced to books like You Got It on Your Shelf, Scaling Up, Profit First, actually. And so I graduated college in 2012. The next year, we grew the business 300% 1 year. I was young and dumb enough to think that revenue equals profit. And I learned the hard way that doesn't work. Like, it doesn't work. And even worse is you can have revenue and you can have profit, but you can have no cash. So Vern talks about in the introduction to Scaling Up, we quite literally grew broke, financially broke. We ran out of cash. Line of credit's maxed at the bank. We had 3.5% net. It was all out on AR. And so in January of 2014, we grew broke. My mom died at 53 of congestive heart failure. She went to sleep and didn't wake up, which was a really big wake-up call for me. And then in February and March, like, we had some major company culture issues. And I figured out pretty quick, Rocky, like, as much ambition as I had, it didn't make a damn bit of difference. I needed like a more strategic, systematic way to grow my company. And it was because of the training and tools and scaling up and actually profit first that totally rewired how I thought about doing business. And it rewired about how I thought about growing an organization. So I used the tools from Scaling Up and Profit First. Number one, to do a financial turnaround. By the way, if you're listening to this and you don't bank with a community bank where like the underwriting's done locally, you need to. Because what happened when we grew broke and our line of credit was maxed, I just got on the phone with the president of the bank. We had a conversation. I told him exactly what was going on, where things went wrong, and what I was doing to correct it. He said, "No problem, Corwin. I'm not going to lean on you." He's like, "We're here." And then I had a monthly call with like one of their bankers to check in and review my financials. I don't know for sure if we were a big bank, there's a good chance they would have just pulled the line and said, "You guys are done." So it was thanks to our banking relationship and the flexibility they extended us, because it was a local bank and I had a relationship with the president, that they gave us the grace to turn the company around financially. And then bigger than that, implementing the tools and scaling up. I don't have a better way to describe it beyond before scaling up, it felt like I was dragging my team uphill. Like, I was working really hard and I was really frustrated with them. And I knew damn well where I was going, but I had to drag them along the way. And what I didn't realize is it was me. Like, I was the problem, right? I knew I was the problem. I just didn't know where I was the problem. And it was implementing things like the one-page strategic plan and the meeting rhythms and changing how we hired and managed people that turned everything around for us culturally. And it turned our profit around too. We got from 3%. We ended the year in 14 and 3% to 13% in 14. And profit continued to improve. And the other thing that improved too was my autonomy or freedom from the business. I started working about 20 hours a week, started helping peers of mine in EO with their companies. And, I realized like I had a third of a life crisis, as I describe it, if you can have one of those. And I made the decision to sell the company and start helping companies full time. Because what I figured out was like my dad failed at entrepreneurship altogether, which, I think is probably credited to a lack of discipline. He'd owned that himself. My grandfather on my mom's side, he owned a butcher shop, and he literally worked so hard, Rocky, that his last 20 years he was stooped because he carried beef carcasses all around, like blew his back up. And then my grandfather on my dad's side was an entrepreneur, and he couldn't ever quite get his business to take off.
And you know what? That's the story of most business owners. Yeah. They struggle. And when I look at business owners, I think the first part is they didn't pick a lucrative business.
Sure.
And you have to sit down and look at the business model and say, is there a possibility of being lucrative in this business? Am I going to be profitable?
Mm-hmm.
And what is that path to profitability? And then the second thing is growth, as you talked about, can lead to failure. Do I have a growth plan that my cash grows with me? Or is it going to suck me dry on the way? And in which case, what's my plan to get through the dry spell?
Right.
To get to that part.
Yeah.
And being able to understand that and so forth. And you even had an accounting background. And it's funny because accounting really doesn't teach you how to be profitable. Right? Business school clearly doesn't teach you how to run a business.
No one teaches you anything to be successful in college. Yeah, like that's my opinion. I'm not bullish on college myself unless you're a scientist or a doctor or something.
No, I agree with you. What was it about EO that kind of made the difference?
The first thing was the learning. I got introduced to authors like Vern Harnish and Mike Malkowitz and others in their books that it opened my mind. I'd always been a bit of a voracious reader, so that wasn't the issue. My issue was like I just didn't know the right books to read, like the right people to seek help from for the situations I was in, right? Like Tim Ferriss's 4 Hour Workweek is a great book and they're great principles. It couldn't help me very much at all inside of growing my construction company. Good ideas and good concepts, but it was not super helpful in growing my construction company because of the fact that I needed like a real structure for my business, but ultimately my team to get behind and get aligned behind. And that was the big gap I had.
And it's the right message at the right time. And unfortunately, today there are so many books, and it's the appropriate time and which one, because you don't have enough time to read them all necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, I think the two best ones for process and business are Scaling Up and Traction. I think they both give you a good philosophy. And the way that it's been explained to me, and I don't know if you have much experience with Traction.
Sure.
What I've been told is Traction is better for smaller, meaning even 8-figure businesses.
Sure.
Scaling Up is better for businesses that are, pushing that 9-10-figure range.
Yeah.
Is that what you see, or?
Yeah, I don't know if that's entirely accurate. I mean, Gino describes it right in the introduction of the book, is traction is helpful when a company already has its growth strategy figured out. I encounter one of my largest clients today. When I first started working with them, they kind of had a strategy, not really. They really didn't have a meaningful growth strategy that actually differentiated them in the mind of their customers. And the right customers, as you mentioned, it's the right customers too, because there's no bad industries. There's only bad leaders, and the leaders aren't thinking about it the right way and figuring out, okay, for instance, we're in the waste management industry. Well, who are the highest value customers in waste management? How do we capture them and ignore the rest, right? The pool of profit said another way. So that's a critical thing that Gino admittedly leaves out in Traction, is how to get your strategy dialed in. And it's a little bit light on people and cash. It's really an execution system at its core, which, look, like vision without execution is hallucination, period. Simple as that. It really is. What I appreciated about Scaling Up is it's much more comprehensive. We do dial into the execution stuff, a little bit into the cash, not like Profit First does. It's more high-level financial strategy. And then people and strategy are mission critical. And really at the core of my business today, Rocky, is helping business owners figure out who are the right people, how do I get them in the right seats, and how do I get them doing the right things right? Simple as that.
Okay, that is not simple.
Simple but not easy. Simple but not easy, yeah. Yeah.
Right? On the Profit First side, it's simple.
Yeah.
The money goes here and it will behave this way.
Sure.
I can tell people to go here and I think they're going to behave this way, but they don't behave the same way that money does. Money is consistent in I don't have to worry about the variations.
Sure. They don't, money doesn't have mood swings. Money doesn't call in sick. Yeah. So what's fascinating about my journey, Rocky, is like I've been there. I've mishired. I mishired a lot. I mean, it's part of why we grew broke. We mishired. And what I learned is really the process I help clients implement today is like we have to take a totally different approach to, number one, hiring. Like what I find, and even with current clients today, is when they're going to market, they think that they need, we'll just make this up, they think they need a financial controller. I'm going to go hire a financial controller. Why do I need a controller? Well, someone in my EO forum or YPO forum told me I needed a controller, or I think we need a controller. And then what we uncover when we actually sit down with clients and we do an exercise called role scoping is we figure out is they actually just need an accounting clerk, or maybe they actually need a CFO. So what happens is like from the very beginning when the hiring process starts is they're not even clear specifically on what role they're actually trying to hire for their company and what that function is going to do. So that's number one. And then number two is Brad Smart from Top Grading says this repeatedly, is 70% of resumes are lies, right? And so what happens is like we go to market and we get a bunch of resumes coming in And, 70% of the resume is lies, roughly. And we do these interviews, and many managers run into something I call interview fatigue, which is like, gosh, like I've interviewed 15 people. I'm exhausted. I'm tired of talking to people. I need someone now inside of my business. So I'm just going to it looks like the best person and I'm going to hire them, which we know how that turns out. It turns out we end up hiring the wrong people, right? Roughly, hiring success in the U.S. on average is about 20% of the time companies hire A players is normal. 20% of the time, 1 in 5 is an A player. But implementing top grading, which is one of the systems we help clients implement, we've gotten to the point where we help them hire 80 to 90% A players on the first pass.
So I have a question about that, because one of the biggest things people tell me is, especially in a small business,
sure,
I can't afford A players. Why would an A player come here?
Yeah. Here's how an A player is defined. Number one is for the wage that you can afford to pay, they're the best talent for your buck is number one, right? Wage you can afford to pay, they're the best talent for your buck. And then number two, what often happens is we hire 2 or 3 B, C players to cover for 1 A player.
Yeah. And so nothing gets done. We're all really busy.
We're all really busy working really hard. Yeah, working really hard, going nowhere fast. Versus what's interesting is, and I've watched it over and over with my clients. I mean, 8 years now I've been coaching consulting companies, and I've identified if they can get the right people on the bus in the right seats doing the right things, their job's easy. It really is. They get the wrong person on the bus. Either it's not a culture fit or they don't have the right capabilities for the role, what the role actually requires. And they're just creating more misery and frustration for themselves, period. It's as simple as that. And so what we figured out is like one of the key leverage points for our clients having success is making sure that they're hiring the right people. And the way I describe it is like I've been in bad relationships before, dating and otherwise. And especially in a situation where you're dating someone, the relationship was always over from the beginning. It was never good to begin with. Like maybe there was like a honeymoon phase where it was good. And then you figure out pretty quick, this is a bad, toxic relationship. And the hard part is entrepreneurs have that same experience where they hire someone and like the first 30 or 60 days are good. And then they get deeper in and they're like, who is this monster that I invited into my company? What happened? You had this incredible resume. You had all these accomplishments you told me you did. And like, you're failing miserably. And then entrepreneurs start talking about how like, oh, just employees suck or people suck. Really?
I get that. And so when I think about what you're talking about, a couple of things come to mind.
Please.
When we interview, we tend to hire based on likability. That's right. They love the same baseball team I love, or they went to the same college, or I like, they're in like, okay, that's nice, but that's not going to cut it 60 days down the road. The second thing is a lot of times they'll hire somebody because they're really good at something.
Sure.
And while they're really good at that, they're a horrible culture fit.
That's right.
Right? Or they're not teachable.
Sure.
In a sense. And so what I always try and tell people, and you tell me if I'm right, is hire to culture first.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because you can't change a person's core values. And then, or should you, and then teach them. And it's funny, I think we ask the wrong questions in interviews. And I can't remember the questions out of the books that we talked about, top grading and who.
Yeah.
But I want to know, why are they passionate about this job? And what is it about it that drove them here? Because if it's a paycheck, bad fit. Right? Or if it's not a burning desire for them, then, or if they don't have a burning desire to be involved in your company because of something they notice about your values and the way you do things, I think it's a problem. But this all comes back to the core, right? I can't hire to culture if I didn't figure out a culture and
if I don't know what my culture is, if it's not explicit. Yeah, how do we hire according to culture if our culture is not clear, right? That's number one. And then the other hard part too is like interviewing is difficult because you're going to have like gosh, if you really do drawn out top grading style interviews, 4 to 5 hours of conversation for an entry level type job, that's not very long to date before you hire someone. You metaphorically marry them. And so one of the things we use aggressively is we use a series of behavioral assessments, and we have benchmarks built for the different roles, which helps us create better prediction of how someone's going to perform in a role. Because what we know is like, if there's not certain driving forces, for instance, for a salesperson, gosh, no matter how hard they work or how committed they are, they're never going to be successful. Or if there's not the right driving forces in play for a customer service person, they'll never be successful, or an accounting person, or fill in the blank. If it's not there, it's just not there. And so part of this feels like also honoring people as human beings, because like nothing worse than I can imagine getting hired on a new job 60 to 90 days in, figuring out like this job sucks. Because what I've noticed is if we're miserable or frustrated with the people we're managing, I promise they're frustrated with us too. The feeling's always mutual. It's always mutual.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must-listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. I think a lot of people take a safe path. I went into this career because, my parents told me it was a safe, good way to make money, not because I had a passion for it.
Right.
They end up in a job that, okay, that's what my degree says, so I have to show up here to do this because that's what I'm told, but it isn't. Yeah, they don't really have the passion. And I think the older I get or the more I see, I've noticed how you've really got to figure that part of it out.
Yeah.
And see, and it's funny because you said one of your first jobs was in the medical sales. And I've found the guys who were best at it, and you can say women too,
Sure.
were the ones who were excited about walking into an OR and teaching a doctor. Like that lit their day up that they were going to go get to do that. Versus the ones who heard that, hey, this is a great job that pays well and I don't have to work that hard.
Yep. Yeah, you just entertain for a living, right?
Yeah, I entertain for a living. And then, after a while, getting entertaining people you don't like isn't fun anymore.
Gets old really quick. Yeah.
It does. I did it for a long time, I know.
Yeah. Well, here you are.
Here I am.
Chasing.
Yeah, now I have fun. But I think that's also what created the situation where I struggle with the whole concept of being able to find the people who are lit up.
Mm-hmm.
And, at the end of the day, I guess it's how do you find people who are lit up for what you want them to do? Or is that how you then portray yourself out into the community and people go, oh, I want to be part of that?
Yeah. So what we run into in November, we actually started doing recruiting for our clients, a select few clients, and we're building our own team right now of recruiters. But there's usually a few breakdowns. The first one is most companies don't have nearly enough applicants to begin with. The pool's too small. So if they're looking at, call it 40 or 50 applicants for a job, they've got a pretty narrow pool if it's more of like a frontlines entry level type job. More specialized or senior level roles, you're not going to see that many applicants. So number one is having adequate number of applicants, and that's driven by the employer brand. It's amazing to look at how much money companies spend on marketing to get new customers, but how little they spend on marketing to get the best employees. The number one driver of profitability in business is really the people that are delivering your goods or services.
So can you give me an example? How do I spend money on marketing to find the right employee?
Right. So the first thing is actually going through and looking on, for instance, your career page or About Us page and really painting a picture of an authentic view of what your company culture is. Number one. And if your culture is not good, like you got to deal with that first. You got to go through and make sure on the job boards that it really displays and highlights how your culture is unique and how you have a compelling vision and compelling mission that people actually want to get behind. And make sure you broadcast it everywhere.
What percent of business owners do you think have a compelling vision and mission that they tell the world about?
I don't think many have it. I think it's in their head. And that's the challenge that they run into. And many times why I start working with clients is because they're working too hard. They're frustrated. They know their business could or should be growing faster. It should be more fun and easier. They've got a team around them, but their team is just not seeing the vision. They're not bought in.
And so I know when I was looking at your stuff, one of the things that you claimed is for that business owner, a 40% reduction in time management.
Yeah.
Doubling of net profit and 500 to 800% increase in business valuation.
Right.
How do you do that?
The first thing is, like, many of our clients approach us when they know an exit is imminent, meaning they've got like 3 to 5 years or greater down the road that they're going to want to exit the business. And sometimes an exit is formal, meaning they're going to sell to a private equity firm or a competitor or something else. In some cases, they're actually looking at an ESOP or some other way of exiting. And then another case is just hiring a professional management to run the company for them. So they know an exit is imminent. And what the situation they find themselves in is they're just working too much as it is. They're missing out on too much of life. They're missing their kids' games. They're missing the things that are meaningful and actually important and the reason why they started the business. So the way that we're able to reduce the business owner's time to manage the business by 40% or greater, number one, is first working with the leadership team to get the leadership team aligned. As goes the leadership team, goes the rest of the company. That's number one. Many times what we figure out is a business owner thinks they have a leadership team, but they don't. They don't. So we have to really clearly define roles, responsibilities, and accountabilities for everyone on the leadership team first. And then the next step is cascading that throughout the organization. So everyone is aligned, doing the right things at the right time. And then number two is actually adjusting the meeting rhythms. So one of the critical elements of the Rockefeller habits of scaling up is a system of daily huddles and weekly meetings. And what I found is having really effective daily huddles and weekly meetings easily saves 15 to 20 hours a week. And just like got a minute meetings, but meetings, emergency meetings, other things like that. Because what's happened for employees is they haven't had a consistent, reliable time to meet with their manager or their supervisor to get issues solved or get questions answered. So they just start blowing up the manager or leader's day all day, every day. That's number one.
And I can see that. How long are these daily and weekly meetings generally?
Daily huddles, no more than 15 minutes. It's very fast. And a weekly meeting is no longer than 90 minutes.
All right. So that weekly meeting is a long meeting.
Relatively long. What I find is clients that I initially start with, they're having weekly meetings with whatever form of leadership team they have. Their weekly meetings, if they have them, tend to run 2 or 3 hours, and they're a total waste of time.
I know this may sound silly, but is there a better day of the week to have a weekly meeting?
I like Tuesday.
I was going to guess Tuesday because Friday, it used to drive me up the wall. When I was in corporate, they wanted to have a meeting on Friday mornings, and I go, we can have this meeting on Friday morning. But in about 4 hours, I'm checked out. And by the time Monday comes, I'm not going to remember a thing you told me on Friday morning.
That's right. Yeah.
Monday morning, people are kind of like getting themselves back. They're dealing with the mess of the weekend that might have showed up on their doorstep.
Right.
By Tuesday, I would think they're in the rhythm. Yep. And Wednesday almost feels like it's starting to push late. Like I don't have enough time to make a change based on what we decide.
The prior week's too far gone. Yeah. Monday tends to be too tight. Most organizations can't get the data quick enough on the prior week, I've noticed. So it tends to be Tuesday's the best day. And then what I tell leadership teams is, for instance, if you're going to meet as a leadership team and then meet with mid-management or meet with the people, because some of them are working managers, meet with your team, do it all in one day. So that way we can get the information flowing top to bottom really fast. And same with daily huddles. You want to stack daily huddles together so we can keep the information flowing as rapidly as possible throughout the organization.
And that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
And I think this is what people don't realize, and you said it, and I just want to emphasize it. Having a standard systematic meeting rhythm removes all the fires throughout the week. And I don't think people get that.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is it's a process of retraining, Rocky. Like, so what I find is when leaders and managers first implement the daily huddles, they say, man, like, we're doing the daily huddle, but I'm still constrained for time. And then I ask them, understood, how many like got-a-minute meetings or fires are showing up on your desk every day? And, it's 20 or 15 or whatever the number is. All right, great. So here's what you do next time. Is next time one of your individuals brings you something that is like a got-a-minute meeting or whatever it is, just ask them, hey, can this wait till tomorrow's daily huddle? Or does it have to be handled right now so we can keep the action moving forward? 9 times out of 10, it can wait till the huddle. And what's interesting is just load it in the daily huddle, and we'll cover it in the daily huddle during the stuck section, for instance. And what's fascinating is instead of the manager having to be the smartest guy or gal in the room, the stuck comes up, and many times peers are solving the issue for their peers instead of the manager having to be the smartest person in the room.
I'm wondering how many times the problem got solved before the daily huddle.
A lot. Yeah. It's hard because like many times as managers and leaders, we got there because we're hardworking individuals and we're caring and we're helpful and we're good at solving problems. And so it's like, throwing a bone for a dog or a tennis ball. It's like, whew, we're gone. Hey, I got a problem for you, Corn. Whew, gone, solving it. Instead of checking in and like actually being able to discipline myself and say like, this is going to create a really big long-term issue. I have to retrain myself first as a manager or leader to stop people and ask them if they can wait till the huddle. And it takes a little bit of time, a couple weeks on average, to really retrain your team to just start bringing stuff to the huddles and pushing it off to the huddles because most things are not an emergency.
They're not. I agree with you. So you said that was kind of the first step. But what comes next?
So the first thing we do is we create structure throughout the organization with a function accountability chart, job scorecards, which we adopted from Top Grading. And then we run these assessments on the existing team also. So we'll run these same assessments we use on hiring on the existing team. And it's inevitable anywhere someone has people issues, 85% of the time, the individual in a certain role does not meet the benchmark for the assessment. So no amount of coaching is going to help them be successful. So as long as they're a core values fit, our first move is actually to rehome them in a new role if there's an open position in the company. So goal number 1 is we've got someone that's a culture fit. Let's see if there's another role that has an opening that we can move them into. That's move number 1.
And so as you do all the assessments, you might just find the people are all in the wrong seats, and then you can just play musical chairs and fix it all.
Yeah.
Question, I've heard in some states you're not allowed to do assessments prior to hiring.
Everything we do is EEOC compliant, and we've never had an issue with doing assessments. Yeah. There might be some assessments that are not EEOC compliant or hiring compliant. I don't know which ones are and aren't. I'm not a HR expert.
Somewhere that I heard it said, I don't know that it's entirely true. The assessments you do, are these like the standard ones out there like DISC and Myers-Briggs and Culture Index?
So DISC is one of 4 sciences we use. So DISC is behaviors. It's how people work. That's definitely important in matching the role. The second one is driving forces based on Edward Spranger's model, which is actually what motivates people. So we want to match what the job requires with how people normally work, number 1. Number 2, we want to match with what the job requires with what actually motivates someone at work. Because if their behavioral style works, but the work they're doing does not motivate them naturally, they're not going to do it long term. Like this whole discipline thing is kind of silly because it's finite. I believe everyone wakes up, Rocky, with a finite amount of discipline every day. And if for me to be successful at my job, it takes a significant amount of discipline because I don't get any energy from the work I'm doing. I'm not going to last long term. You called it passion, discipline. Passion is the other side of the coin. If I'm passionate, I'm going to keep doing it. The third science we dig into is what's called ACI index, which helps us understand how clear an individual thinks about their external world and thinks about their internal world. And then the last one is a rating of their competencies or skills. And so we have benchmarks for virtually every role that we hire for clients or help clients place. And it's really simple. First interview with the candidate, they interviewed well. The next conversation is their assessment. And if they interviewed well in the first interview and they passed the assessment, then we bring them in person for an in-depth interview, top grading style interview, tandem interview. And then from there, we actually go through full reference checks and we have them set them up.
Do you find a lot of people don't do reference checks?
Oh, almost no one does.
But part of that thing, again, comes back to legality. Nobody's really going to answer the question, are they?
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
Okay.
So if I'm calling to do a reference check on a potential hire, as far as I know, I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on the internet or on TV or any of the other places. As far as I know, I can ask any question, within reason. I can't ask about race, religion, or something like that.
Right.
But it's up to the person I'm talking to decide how they filter their answers.
And that's what I'm talking about, the person responding, being afraid.
That's up to them to figure it out. I found most people are very open, by and large. Now, what we did run into when I had my restoration company is people would call us and ask us for a reference about a candidate that we terminated. And our answer was they no longer work here. How did they perform? They no longer work here.
Yeah, you got to learn to read between the lines.
Yeah. How do they perform? They're no longer employed here. Okay, got it. Yeah. Yeah. If we would have liked them, we would have kept them. Just saying. Yeah. Versus when you're doing a reference check on an A player, many times what you hear from a hiring previous manager is, gosh, if I had the chance again, I'd hire Rocky to my team tomorrow. Candidly, like if you don't hire him, I may be going after him, is the narratives you're going to find when you're talking to a reference for an A player. They speak effusively about how this individual performed. They'll get into specifics of how they performed. And many times they're going to say, if the opportunity presented itself, no question, they're on my team again.
Why don't people, it comes back to doing the simple things, right? Checking the references.
Yeah.
And putting a little bit of extra work into it to make sure. And so I don't have employees because, we talked about it's my kryptonite, but when I put renters in, I call the references.
Same deal.
And I have had people fail the references.
Yeah.
I've had also people lie about their references. In other words, they give me their own phone number or another phone number of theirs. Like, here's my landlord. It's their mother or something.
Yeah.
So we actually verify the phone number by going to the property records to make sure I'm talking to the right people.
Yeah.
It's amazing. But because of that, we solve the problem up front, which comes back to what you're talking about. The problem occurred with the way that you hired.
That's right.
And you created it because, I'm too busy. I'm overworked. I need somebody.
Yep.
And I don't care if you're talking even at the simplest, lowest wage, all the way through the company. If your culture isn't to behave in a certain way and it's to run around on fire, well, then that's the culture.
That's right. Yeah. And so you hire someone new as talented or capable as they were at their other companies. If you don't have basic culture in place, if you don't have basic structure, they're likely to fail,
And one of the things I tell people is to create a list of people that you'd like to have come work for you.
That's right. Yeah.
In other words, I'm out somewhere and I meet some people. I want to add them to my list. Not that I'm hiring today, but when I go to hire, I've got a list of 10 of these and 20 of that. And
always be building your bench. Yeah. That's the other challenge too, is like many business owners, they just think like, well, I'm not hiring right now, so I'm not going to interview. Look, if like a great candidate shows up, you can at least perform a first interview and just say, hey, like we don't have any openings. Is it okay if we keep your name on file? Always be building the bench. Always, always, always. Yeah.
That means you need to have a file that's easily accessible and one that will remind you of what you're looking for.
That's right.
Systems and processes, right? So what else is next?
Just saying. So we deal with that. Then the third area we deal with to help reduce their time to manage the day-to-day really fundamentally is actually helping them as the business owner figure out like what are they deeply passionate about? What are they enjoying the business? And how do we get rid of the rest? How do we delegate everything else?
And that's the key. We actually have a profit first course. And one of the things, the exercises and modules in there is your loves and your hates. And it's sit down. What do I love to do in the business? And what don't I? And then the next thing is, how do I get rid of the stuff I don't want to do? Because you won't do it, right? There goes willpower out the door.
Yeah.
And more often than not, there's somebody who loves doing what you hate.
Oh, yeah. Like I look, for instance, at like accounting professionals. I just admire them because there's nothing I enjoy less than having to do like the data entry and, like the accounting clerk role or bookkeeper role. It's miserable to me. But there's individuals that like nothing lights them up more than the feeling of accomplishment and how linear it is and how specific it is. It's like a puzzle for them. For me, not going to happen. Not going to happen. Yeah. I'm just not going to do it.
I get it. I wasn't sure. How many steps are there?
Those are the three big areas for us.
Those are the three big.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right off the front to reduce the time to manage day to day. Yeah.
All right. So let's take a step back. You talked about profit first, how much you love it. How did it change your business? The
first thing is I don't have a better term other than like I was really irresponsible and like lived on a hope and a prayer that we'd be profitable rather than, bottom up budgeting of like, okay, like we're going to budget our profit target first and then let's see where everything else fits inside of it. And the biggest thing we focused on, Rich, was like, okay, this is our labor salary cap we have for our company. We can only spend this much money, which what it did is it forced us to make different decisions about the people we had on our team. And, that's not necessarily spelled out in Profit First, right? But it is a true thing. If you know what your salary cap is, then you can sit down and say, where am I going to spend my money and how? Right. Yeah. And where am I going to put for the best day player? So it's just like a baseball team or whatever. They've got a budget. It's no different. And really, when you look at it, I've worked extensively with companies in professional services, construction, manufacturing, every industry. The most controllable expense is labor, period. I mean, you can go in and you can negotiate with suppliers and get a reduction, but I mean, gosh, we're still in a rather inflationary environment. You can only get so much out of suppliers. And so the next place to look is at people. And like, that's where you have the most flexibility on how do you really return to profitability. And what's hard is many times, like we look at, Tom on the team and, Tom really sucks at his job, but he's a nice guy and he's been here for 5 years. So we just really got to keep Tom on the team. And it's hard to rip the Band-Aid off. Yeah, like I don't want to have a hard conversation with Tom because I like him. He's a really likable guy, but he's a horrible at his job. He's a horrible technician, for instance. We had one of these guys. We'll use Tom for his name. He was one of those guys where when we started implementing scaling up, super likable guy. He was one of our technicians. Customers loved him, but he's kind of like the lovable F-up. Like, I don't have a better way to describe it. And what happened is like we started to put tighter structure in and, more accountability on our technicians. And it was a conversation with him like, hey, look, we have uniform service for you. If you show up again with your uniform not on or crumpled up in a wad or untucked, or you show up late, that's the end of the relationship for us. And of course, inevitably, he showed up late with his, uniform looked like it'd been in a wad. And there's no reason for that. We had uniform service. We had lockers at the shop. I mean, and so what happened is we started to put tighter accountability on people around performance, and it made it a lot easier for us to make those hard people decisions. Because it wasn't like, hey, you're a jerk or something else. It's like, you're just not meeting the numbers. You're not meeting the requirements. Because the hard part is many of these people that are draining our salary cap, if you will, which is ultimately draining our profit, are pretty nice people. Those are the hard ones to let go of. The easy ones to let go of are jerks. Unless they're high performing. That's the C player trap, is the high performing jerk. And those usually show up in sales, right? The other thing though is if you have those in place, they may just walk out on their own. And so you don't even have to do it. But then it comes back to the loves and drains. And if that's a drain, put somebody else in there. Let someone else who likes letting people go, because there are people who do. I can't say I've met anyone that actually enjoys firing people, but I think some people have an easier time with it because they tend to be a little more structured in their approach and a little more analytical. And for them, what they see is like the data and the numbers, and like the person's not performing, and here's the data that they're not performing. And it's like, hey, sorry, like, you coach them first, but it's a really clear, it's a really clear up or out coaching program. And we're not going to do this into eternity. We got 6 weeks to make a change, and we're going to meet weekly for 6 weeks. And if things don't change after 6 weeks, what should the next step be? And, inevitably people will say, I'll probably have to find a new job. And it's like, you're right. Our goal is to make this work, though. We want you on the team. We want you to be successful, but here's exactly what has to change.
Let's say somebody new comes to you.
Yeah.
How long does it take for all these changes to get implemented and become part of the natural rhythm? Because, more often than not, they're like, hey, I'm running around with my hair on fire. I don't have time for all of this.
Yeah. Yeah, like there's a sweet spot. Really, like our smallest clients have 15 to 20 employees, and they implement the changes a lot faster. When we look at a client with 300, 400, 500 employees, it takes a lot more time. It's like trying to turn a battleship versus a jet ski.
How much of it depends on the business owner's, I don't know what the right word is, ability to move quickly, I guess, in spite of it.
To be very decisive. Yeah. What kills you in business is being indecisive. And I think it kills businesses of every size and leaders of every size, is instead of making a decision, we just sit there and wait and meditate and contemplate and think about. And I don't know, 99% of decisions, the best thing to do is make a decision and move, and you're going to learn. You're going to learn versus just pausing and indecision and trying to figure out the right way or the best way. You don't learn. You learn nothing.
It's funny. I've had some of them tell me they made the decision.
Yeah.
It was the execution.
Yeah.
I know I needed to make that phone call. I wasted half my day before I picked up the phone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, while you were doing other stuff, your mind was there and nothing was getting. So no wonder you don't get anything done, because I've always said, do the hard thing first.
That's right. Yeah. It's the 24-hour rule. Like, don't lose sleep more than, one night over the decision. Because I've watched, it's happened to me. I've watched with other business owners where like multiple sleepless nights over, generally it's a people decision where they have the most sleepless nights. And it's like, no, like no more than one sleepless night, make your decision and move. Like it's that simple. And, many times what's helpful too is to bring in, if you have a leadership team or some sort of management team, bring them in on the decision. Where it's difficult is if it's an individual on the leadership team to make a really clear objective view, which is why it's helpful to have coaches or advisors, because they can kind of, look at the game at play and give you more objective feedback. But yeah, sometimes it's helpful to bring in, additional parties and bring the facts to the table to help you kind of move fast and just make the decision and go.
And that's what you have to do. Just execute, implement systems.
And you learn from it. And, hopefully it's successful. And if it's not, then you got a lesson learned and you move on.
Let go.
Yeah.
I've always said the number one stumbling block is the reflection in the mirror.
Mm-hmm. Always at every level.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
My secret to living an abundant life, Rocky, is I work with clients to implement a one-page business plan. I also help them build a one-page life plan, which mirrors the one-page business plan, and setting targets for themselves across their body, being, which is spirituality, balance, which is relationships, particularly starting like if they're married, their partner, their children, and friends. And then finally, business is the fourth outcome. And so what happens is we set targets at a 10-year, 3-year, 1-year, 90-day interval. And so we work together to constitute what's actually meaningful to them. And how does their business serve what's actually meaningful to them? Because it's just a vehicle. That's all it is.
I am a big fan of having a life plan. What I have noticed is a lot of people are afraid to write it. And I don't know why.
That's interesting. Yeah.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
I think the biggest lesson I've had later in life is that really success comes down to the relentless execution of the boring basics. And that really, like, fundamentally, there's no such thing as bad industries. There's really not. There's no bad industries. It really comes down to every single industry has a pool of profit in it. You just have to find it and adjust your strategy sale to capture it. It's as simple as that. And so, many times, like, I'll encounter business owners that they come to me and they're 40, 50 years old. They could technically work longer. Hey, Corwin, I want to exit my company. And we get all the way underneath everything. They're just frustrated and burned out with dealing with people. And so I ask them, I say, so we sell your company. Let's say we sell it for $10 million It's not going to be enough to cover now plus your retirement. It's not enough. What are you going to do next? Oh, I'm going to go start another company in this industry because this industry is better. Really? Really? Okay.
Out of curiosity,
Yeah.
after you help people,
Yeah.
is there a large percentage of them that go, I think I love this business now. I'm not selling.
Most of them. Yeah. And so what's fascinating is it buys them time. And that's where we get the 500 to 800% value increase because we help them improve their profitability. We improve the value of the business because it runs itself. We help them get in a strategic niche so they're more valuable. And what happens is they're like, geez, like I could really do another 3 to 5 years, no problem. So the value keeps growing. And then when they actually go to market, like they're not desperate. They don't have to sell. It's like if the right acquirer shows up for the right price, everyone has their number, I'm going to sell it. And if it doesn't, then I'm just going to keep building the business and I'll, go to market down the road.
And that's a wonderful place to be in.
Yeah. Options, right?
Options. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
That's a great question. I have 4 kids, by the way. My oldest is 11. So this is.
You have 7 years.
Yeah, exactly. I love Joseph Campbell's adage, which was follow your bliss.
And that's fine as long as you know what it is.
That's the key. And so I think what's hard for people is my experience of growing up, I'm still growing up. I think we're ever growing up is undoing the programming from our parents and the fears of our parents and everything that they put on us. Generally unconsciously, my parents are amazing. But, being able to figure out what's actually true for me and what's meaningful for me and following that and having the courage to tell the truth about it and follow that.
I get it. If people would like to learn more about you or get your help to have their businesses grow, how do they do that?
Yeah. So website is culture2cash.com. You can find us there. You can also find me on Instagram. Corwin J. Smith is my handle. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I think that's all the platforms I'm on. So would love to connect and have a conversation.
Cool. We'll put that all in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Does your business serve you? If you've got a job, does it serve you? Is it systematized and easy to do and fun? Why not? When I was working, I systematized my work. In my business, I systematized my business. In both cases, they served my life. I didn't serve it, right? I don't live to work. I work to live. And so it should be fun. The other question is, who are you surrounding yourself with? Are they pulling you up? Are they getting you out of your head and pushing you forward? Think of a couple nuggets that resonated today and implement them in the next couple days to get yourself moving. Because if you don't do it now, you'll never do it. Next week, I've got Brad Klontz on. We are going to talk about financial money mindsets. It's the reason I ask that first question of every guest. So check that out. By the way, if you enjoyed today's episode, who else do you know who might enjoy it? Would you do me a favor and would you share it with them? I'd appreciate that. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.